Okay, so I do actually have a whole presentation planned. Sorry? Okay, so I've been told to tell you all to put on your headphones. I think that way you can hear better. So I do have a whole presentation planned, but I am assuming that everybody's here because they know what intimacy coordination is. Is that right? So will you just nod if you do know it? So I don't want to go through basics when everybody knows the basics. I'd much rather take the conversation forward, which is what I was hoping to do today. Because essentially what has happened in the last, I would say the last 2 or 3 years in terms of intimacy coordination, is that the whole field has taken a massive jump. And when intimacy coordination happened, when it started in the world and in South Africa, it was really, really spearheaded by the Me Too movement. So it was women saying, I don't want to be abused, I don't want to be taken advantage of, I want to be able to say no. And that's kind of where intimacy started. But what has been happening around the world, and actually more specifically across Africa, in terms of intimacy over the last little while, is that as the streamers have sort of grown in the country and as they've come in force, along with the streamers has been a huge increase in the amount of intimate content on our screens. I'm sure it's something that you've all noticed. There's the adultings, there's the facial design. There's a huge amount of content, and as the streamers bring more intimate content in, it does well. And as it does well, the local broadcasters start realizing, oh wow, sex sells, we always knew it did, but now we can do it. So they start to do more and more intimate content. And that leaves us in a very scary position, particularly in a country that's quite sexually conservative and that has a huge amount of violence, of sexual violence, because suddenly you've got this massive amount of intimate content that is kind of borderline Pornhub. It's sort of starting to take the place of Pornhub and of, pornography or soft porn. The thing that struck me in my head and that made me realize that this change had happened was I was watching Netflix the one day, and the number one show on Netflix in South Africa was a Mexican show called Who Killed Sara. Did anyone see that show? No, nobody saw it. So I was like, okay, well, why is this show, it's like a Mexican sort of high school drama, why is this show number one in South Africa? And I watched it. Every other scene was either nakedness or intimacy. And it made me start understanding this is what people want to watch, and this is what is going to come more and more. And I think the questions that we're grappling with as an intimacy industry, as an industry that's starting to do intimacy, is where does that put us? Like, how do we deal with this increased amount of intimate content? What do we do? And there are two sides to it. The one side is we have to mitigate the risk because we're not going to change it. We can't go and start censoring. We can't make up censorship laws that are impossible to implement. So we need to mitigate risk, and obviously the first way that you mitigate risk is you bring in intimacy coordinators in the exact same way you bring in stunt coordinators. Nobody's going to go and shoot a massive, huge stunt scene without the safety net of stunt coordinators. You wouldn't consider it. As a producer, when you look at your script and you write down your script, you're like, here are stunts, we need a stunt coordinator. Number one, because we're not going to get insurance. But number two, because you want to protect your cast and your crew and you want to shoot the next day, right? So the first thing is that mitigation of risk, and how do we do that? I'm going to talk about that in a little while, because I'm going to talk about like how to work with intimacy coordinators to mitigate the risk. But the other side of how we deal with this increased amount of intimate content, and this is for me the really interesting side, is that all of a sudden we're allowing people into private spaces. As a country we're saying, okay, we don't just have the two characters coming together about to kiss and then we fade to black. We're now saying what happens when that kissing happens, or what happens when that sex scene happens. And it actually gives us an extraordinary opportunity to look in those spaces with a storytelling eye. What is actually really going on in those spaces? Not in a titillating way, not in a way of pornography, let's arouse people, but in a way of using those intimate scenes to tell stories that we've been prevented from telling for an extremely long time. It's like all those stories have been behind closed doors. They're not behind closed doors anymore. So how do we start thinking about them? And for me, that's really fascinating, because it allows you, as a writer, as a director, as a producer, it allows you to start changing behavior in a way, because suddenly when you're looking at what sexual violence is, you can actually understand what it is. You can show people what violence against women is. We don't have to just talk about violence against women. You can show people what that horror of violence against women is. But also you can show people a different way where sexuality doesn't have to be a violent thing. It doesn't only have to be a lustful thing. It's a communication. It's what all humans do. It's such a big chunk of our life. And it's extraordinary to be able to look at that as part of the storytelling. So I don't know if anybody here is writers, but it gives you the opportunity, instead of being like, oh God, I've got to write the sex scene, and now when I write the sex scene, everyone's going to know how I have sex in my bedroom, or I don't want to expose myself, or whatever the situation is. All of a sudden you can start breaking that down in a different way and saying, what is happening to my characters? What are my characters' sexuality? How does my character express what's going on with her and her partner in this scene? What's going on? And that's the place of intimacy coordination that is so exciting to me as an intimacy coordinator. And I know Emil's sitting here, so he's also an intimacy coordinator that works very closely with us in Safe Sense. So that's the kind of thing that becomes very interesting when you are an intimacy coordinator, or when you're a director working with an intimacy coordinator, or when you're a writer thinking about how am I going to write this scene. The first step when you're working with an intimacy coordinator is to communicate. So what we do as intimacy coordinators is, instead of the intimate scenes being the last scene you ever talk about, we try and make it be the first scene you talk about. It's not the scene that everybody's embarrassed and the director doesn't want to talk to the actor because maybe they think they will, have a whole other relationship with them. So nobody talks about the intimate scene. You land up on set, suddenly everyone's got to take their clothes off. No one's discussed anything. There's a huge amount of shame. No one knows what to do. That's the worst possible scenario for an intimacy coordination, for an intimacy coordinator. That's exactly the 100% opposite of the way a scene should be coordinated. Because the way a scene should be coordinated is, number one, with understanding of context. So the scene doesn't exist by itself as a little nugget in a script that you don't know what's going on in the script. That scene exists as part of the storytelling. So you start unpacking what is going on in the storytelling. And I can't tell you how many scripts I have to coordinate, and the line in the script that I've got to work with is, and then they get it on. I mean, it's insane, right? It's like, and then the Titanic sunk. What are you wanting to see? Like, what is going on in the story? What is going on between the characters? And sometimes you're given a script that says, and then they get it on, and you have to work that out together with the director and the actors. So the intimacy coordinator is there to work with the director to understand what the director understands is going on in the story, work with the actors in terms of what the actors' boundaries are. So it's like painting a picture. You don't have the paint colors and the paint brushes until you've really understood from the actors what are they comfortable with. Are they comfortable with showing their breasts, for example? Are they comfortable with showing the side of their buttocks, but maybe not below here because they've got cellulite, or whatever it is that they're comfortable with? That becomes the palette for drawing the intimate scene. So if I know this is what the actors are very comfortable and willing to show and work with, and I know what the director wants to show as the final product in terms of the story, that's where we come in, to take that paintbrush and design and choreograph a scene that works within that palette. I mean, if I had to give a definition of intimacy coordination, I would say that's what it's doing. It's painting the scene with an intention, understanding a palette, so that you're not pushing people beyond their comfort levels. You're not pushing people outside their boundaries. And the thing that I've realized doing intimacy coordination for so many years is you don't have to. It doesn't make the scene better because the person is prepared to show more or do more. It just makes you become more creative. How you show more, and how you imply, and how you cover, and how you disguise. But you allow that performer to be so comfortable that they can act. Because if they're not acting, you've got nothing. If you're sitting there and the actress is like, okay, I'm going to show my breasts, but I'm so miserable about showing my breasts, and this guy's coming in and he's going to kiss me, and I don't know if I'm going to get a tongue in my mouth, and that's all she's thinking about. Or she's thinking about, like, how do I look when I stand like this versus like this, and like, am I showing too much breast? There's no space for a performance. So the other thing that we do as intimacy coordinators is we make that space safe so that the actors can act. And the actors know what's coming, they know what to expect, and they've rehearsed it in the same way you rehearse a dance, or in the same way you rehearse a stunt. You'll never say to a person in a stunt, okay, so you're going to just jump off the building, and we're just going to put the camera there, and we're going to improvise, so just jump like you really jump, and we'll film it and we'll get what we get. That isn't the way that you do a stunt, because it's dangerous. Because it's dangerous and damaging, and also you won't get insurance on your production. Same thing with intimacy. And the minute you make the switch in your heads and understand that intimacy is like stunts, they're not real. You can't improv an intimate scene. Improving an intimate scene is breaking the first rule of intimacy coordination, which is attempting to bring a process to those intimate scenes, which is separating your personal intimacy from your character's intimacy. Right? What you are doing in that intimate scene, it can't be like, okay, are you telling me 5 minutes? Okay, cool. I'm going to finish it in 3 minutes because I do want to have some questions. But you can't, this is an important point. You can't expect an actor to expose their private sexuality. What they do at home with their boyfriend or their girlfriend or whoever their partner is in their bedroom needs to be protected. You can't be having actors that are like, their children come and watch them in the scene and they're like, oh my God, there's my mom's breasts on TV and everyone's seeing my... People have to understand that in the same way they understand stunts. They have to understand that that is in the service of the movie and it's part of the pretending of the movie. And that's our responsibility. to make sure that everybody understands and to talk about intimacy in the same way we talk about stunts. You don't go to the movie and think there was actually a fire and the guy died and you've got to cry tomorrow because, you know, your dad, the actor, is dead. Everybody knows it's pretending. And we need to start understanding intimacy in that same way, because that allows actors to protect their own private, intimate moments. And it is, I mean, for the actors that are here, it's really important that that's the way you talk about the intimate scenes. You know, that you actually talk about the scenes in those intimate scenes. So that when you're giving your interviews and when you're talking about how you jumped off a building and ran through a fire and it was so much fun, but you didn't actually jump off the building, you talk about the intimate scenes in the same way. And it's really, really damaging and bad when producers start encouraging talk about relationships between between actors on set that developed because of the story. That really, really, really works against the ability for actors to do intimate content. Okay, she's saying it's time now. So, sorry about that. It was really very brief, but I hope that I did start to put some thoughts in everybody's head about how exciting this tidal wave that's coming is, and how exciting it really can be if you start engaging and thinking about it in a different way. Does anybody have any questions? Margie, any question?
Hello? Okay. No, I just want to make a comment because I have worked with Sara on an intimacy scene in a film. And I think for me, the amazing thing is that the woman has so much power and has a voice. Because it's different if a director, especially a male, says to an actress, can you do that? It's hard for her to say no. But when you work with an intimacy coach, they go aside with the actress, and the actress has that voice to say to the intimacy coach, to the director, so to the director via the intimacy coach, no, I'm not comfortable. So they have such a powerful voice, and it's so nice for you to just move aside and to work with the actors. You give her a brief, and then she comes back, and then you kind of improvise around. So I'm just adding to the greatness of what that work does.
Thank you so much, Tava. I just want to, I do want to talk to what you're saying, because I think what you're saying is so interesting. Because it is, intimacy coordinator is an HOD position. So it is a position of power that exists in between the other power structures that can literally represent the voice of actors. But the other thing that just to take what you're saying a little bit further is it absolutely coordinates between the departments, works with all the people, but it also allows both partners in the scene to understand each other's boundaries. You know, you always think like, if it's a big rape scene, oh, the man must be having so much fun sitting on top of the woman. But they don't have so much fun. Those scenes are not fun. And they don't know when they're violating, and they don't know when they're crossing lines, and they don't know when they're being too rough. So part of intimacy coordination is the idea of consent. Once you have consent, once somebody says to you, I know you're going to sit on top of me, I know you're going to pin me down, I know you're going to push me, when you do all that, please don't touch my breasts. Like everything else, I'm giving you consent. I'm not giving you consent to touch my breasts. Or I'm not giving you consent to touch my neck, because if you touch my neck, I'm going to throw up on you, or whatever. Like, whatever your boundary is, once you've got that consent, once you've got that yes, this is fine, but no, this is not fine, it allows you again to act within those parameters. And I think what Sara is saying, it's the same thing it allows the director to do. Like the director knows what he's got to play with, or what she's got to play with. But they know what their palettes are that they can use to get that story they're trying to tell. Does that make sense? Does anybody else have a question?
Hi, I just want to ask, I understand that a lot of the contracts now have a rider where a lot of detail is set out about what people are agreeing to.
Yeah.
But obviously not every production can afford board or to manage to have an intimacy coordinator at the moment. Do intimacy coordinators consult with directors and producers in advance so that those riders are specific?
Yes. So what we are pushing for is that intimacy coordinators come on board productions from the moment you've got the money to shoot. And it is to consult about the riders, because it's, the thing that happens is an actor's in an audition and you say, okay, well, you've read the script, there's lots of nudity, are you fine? And the actor's like wanting the role. And she's going to say, sure, I'm fine with everything. I'll cut my hair, I'll take my clothes off, I'll be fine with everything, don't worry about it. On the day where she's actually got to do the intimate scene, she actually realizes she's not fine about it. And it's within her rights to do that. Like, you can't go to her and say, okay, but you signed the contract, now I'm taking you and you're taking you. Like, that's sexual assault, right? Like, a person has a right to change their mind right up to the last day. So in terms of productions mitigating risk, you want to understand where the actor's real boundaries are. Not where the boundaries are that they're telling you in an audition. But is this actually going to work? Or is this actually not going to work before we shoot the whole movie and get to that scene on the last day? I need that scene in my movie. Like, are you actually comfortable? And that's where intimacy coordinators come on board. I mean, an intimacy coordinator should be in a script read-through just like all the other HPDs. They should be there to look at the script and say, what do we need? What wardrobe do we need? What kind of sheets are we going to need in that scene to make sure that the correct body parts are covered? How, like, as those scenes are being discussed, the intimacy coordinator, because I promise you it saves money. When you're sitting on the day of the shoot and you've got 3 hours, and I can't tell you how many times this has happened, with an actress in a bathroom suddenly realizing that their mom is going to watch the scene. And I know I'm fine about it, but I'm actually not fine about my mom watching, whatever the situation is. And you're wasting 3 hours, that costs you a lot more than an intimacy coordinator. It simply does. And I think what we need to fight for in terms of budgets is to make sure that there's no way you're going to shoot a stunt scene without a stunts coordinator. Make sure if you've got an intimate, otherwise don't have the intimate scene. Like, find another way of storytelling that isn't the intimate scene in the same way we do with stunts. Like, we would all like helicopters blowing up, right? But when we can't have a helicopter blowing up, we think of something else. And if you can't afford an intimacy coordinator, think of something else. But don't shoot without an intimacy coordinator, because the risk to you in the production is too great. It's too great financially, it's too great in terms of time, it's too great in terms of money. It doesn't make sense. And especially when it's high levels of intimate content. Yeah. I'm sorry to be so hardcore on that answer, but it's... Is there any more questions?
Hi, my name is Addie Dubé. I'm an AD and aspiring intimacy coordinator, and I know that you just had a cohort of training program for intimacy coordinators, but I'm curious about how else training for this role is being, is applying in terms of like film schools, and whether that's a conversation that's happening. Because I've recently worked as an intimacy coordinator on these projects in a short film, and in an industry where you have a short film where a lot of the training as different departments comes from on-set learning. I'm just curious about how that applies to intimacy coordination, and what resources are out there for people who are wanting to intimacy.
Okay, so Lauren over there was part of the cohort. So she's now working as an intimacy coordinator. You have to go through proper training. You have to go through proper training. There's no shortcuts. Like you are working in a situation where you can cause so much damage, just like a stunts coordinator who doesn't know what they're doing. You know what I mean? So you absolutely need to be properly trained. So in South Africa, there is no training provider. We are the Safe Sense is the training provider, and we did get funding from the NFEF and Netflix to run the last cohort because the training is expensive. It's a long process of training. It takes a lot of time, a lot of like on-set working, and it's like stunt coordination. So we will do another training in South Africa because there's definitely always a need for more intimacy coordinators. But in the meantime, there are, there are people in America that offer the course, and there are people in the UK that offer the course. I know Emil got his training in America, and he's part of doing the training here now. So we are trying to train more people, and we're trying to train more people not at the dollar prices, which are, they're insane. It's like going to an American university to get that training there. You need to be able to save up and have the resources. So yes, please check in on our webpage, the Safe Sense webpage. When there's a training, it will be announced there, and we're definitely going to do a training now, and we have to go. So. Okay. So what he's saying is I've got 5 more minutes. So if there are any more questions, I really would love to have the conversation. So, is the speaker on? Is the mic on?
Is it working? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I sort of have 2 questions. The first one is with regards to writing. How much of the description of the intimacy scene are you supposed to put in the scene?
Yeah.
And then the second question is if you are able to take it back to the basics as to what are the first steps that you would take in preparing for an intimacy scene.
Okay. So it seems like the next speaker is actually cancelled. So I'm actually going to take time to answer your question properly. So for anybody that wants to know how to work with an intimacy coordinator, I think the answer will, it will come into what you're asking, because I think you're asking that. In terms of writing, you write as much as you can, and write what we're going to see on screen or what you want to see on screen. He leans in towards her. He holds her by the shoulders. He kisses her forcefully. She doesn't want the kiss. She tries to turn her head. Like, whatever you can give us in the scene is giving the actor the story and giving the actor the motivation and giving the director. And a story beat should happen in an intimate moment. Something should change, right? We don't go into the scene and come out the scene where we started off. We go into the scene, something changes, we go out the scene. What changes? What happened in that moment of intimacy that changed? That should be in your script. And as much detail of the physicalness of it, because it helps the actor understand when they read the script, am I comfortable with this? How are they going to shoot it? It helps the director plan the shoot. And it helps, it helps the whole crew. The more you can write, same with the stunt scene, the more you can write, the better. The cars chase each other is not really very helpful, but a stunt coordinator can come in and help you work out how the cars chase each other, as can an intimacy coordinator. But they need to know what is the story beat. What is going on that is going to change in that scene. Okay, in terms of working with an intimacy coordinator and how the process works, essentially, you've got a script, right? Now I've got all these intimate scenes, I'm the producer, what do? First thing, I call an intimacy coordinator and I send them the script, just like I would send a stunt coordinator the script. But I don't just send the intimate scenes. I send the whole script so that the intimacy coordinator can see what's going on and what they need. Next step is the producer, and very often in TV shows it needs to be the showrunner and producer and the director and the intimacy coordinator sit in a room together and they discuss what are the boundaries of the show. We're the kind of show that's going to show just breasts but no real nudity, and we're going to allude to sex but we're not going to actually show sex. Or this is a show that's pushing boundaries We're going to show lots of nudity. So you make the parameters of what level of intimacy are you talking about. The next step is the intimacy coordinator has one-on-one meetings with the actor, and they say, what are your boundaries? Okay, I know what you've told production. This is what they know. Now is your chance to actually tell me, what are we doing here? And that conversation is sometimes complicated because sometimes you're sitting with the actor and the actor's still on some, who are you? I don't know who you are. I don't trust you. Yeah, I can do everything. Or you're going to go tell the producers. And you have to start as an intimacy coordinator reading that body language. Is the actor sitting on their hands? Is the actor's entire body tense when they're talking about it? And you really try and get a sense of what is that actor's actual real boundaries. Next conversation is with the director. You go to the director, what are you wanting in this scene? Let me tell you what your actors will give you. It doesn't matter what they've told you they're going to give you. My assessment after having a very private conversation with them is this is where we're going. Is that going to work for you? If it's not going to work for you, maybe we need a body double. Or maybe we need to rethink the scene. Or whatever, but we've got to come up with a solution now before the day on set. Find out the artistic vision from the director, how he or she is seeing the scene. Then you do, in the best case scenario, this doesn't very often work on television drama in South Africa, but in a best case scenario, you go into a rehearsal. So sometimes you do the rehearsal with the director present, and sometimes if the director's busy, you do the rehearsal understanding what the director's vision is. So I will take the actors and I will go and fully clothed, so there's no nudity involved in a rehearsal. We will choreograph the scene. So we will know, I will sit like this on you, you will flip me over, and we practice like you practice a dance. We rehearse so that the movement's in the body, and then the actor, when they know what the dance is, they can act it. They know, I'm going to stand here, I'm going to be pushed against the wall, I'm going to be whatever's going to happen. We've practiced it, we know how it is, we've done it all together with all our clothes on, lots of barriers between us. The next step is you go and have a meeting with the wardrobe department. And this is where you start discussing, what is this actor going to wear, right? There's the rule is a no genitals touch in any intimate scene. There's always barriers between the actors. So what barrier are we going to get away with in this scene? The way we've choreographed it, the way I know we're going to shoot it, I know the camera's going to be here, we can get away with hiding maybe a little cushion here, maybe we can get away with, we're only going to see your back so that you can have a front bra taped on, whatever the intimate wardrobe is, that needs to be discussed ahead of time, provided for, and tried on by the actor. You don't want the actor to arrive on set, suddenly they're wearing this tiny little C-string that goes right up the butt crack. They don't know what it feels like, they're putting it on for the first time, and they're now going to shoot the scene. You want all the stuff to be prepared ahead of time. You want the actor to know, to be comfortable in their wardrobe, to understand what's going to go on. You've done your rehearsal, the actors are comfortable, and then you shoot the scene. And I promise you, these scenes get shot in half the time that any other scenes get shot in if you've done that. If you've done the rehearsal, if you've done the wardrobe prep, if the actors know what's going on. You don't want to do take after take after take when you've got an actress wearing absolutely nothing. It's freezing cold, it's the middle of winter. Most of the intimate scenes are night scenes, so it's nighttime. The actor's skin is starting to turn blue, and you need to do more takes because the wardrobe hasn't been worked out, or the choreography hasn't been worked out. It makes the scenes go so much faster. Having said that, intimate scenes are real scenes. You know what I mean? You can't schedule an intimate scene for the last half an hour of a day. You absolutely cannot do that. In fact, if possible, intimate scenes should be scheduled for the first scene of the day. Because that's when everybody feels they're most beautiful. It's when everybody is like they haven't just had a huge big lunch or a huge big dinner. They've got a huge big tummy, and now they're like, oh God, now I have to do the intimate scene. Or now I have to have another person in my space. You know, it's a difficult thing to have a stranger come into your space. I mean, if you just imagine, if you're sitting next to somebody that you don't know, can you imagine that person coming right into your space? You know, this is our private space. Like, we allow people here, we control, we hug or let go. But in an intimate scene, you've got someone here breathing on you. And that's part of what we do in the beginning of the day of the shoot. So in the day of the shoot, we work with the actors to give them an opportunity to be in each other's space. So that they're not in each other's space for the first time on a set. You know, it's not like, who's this person and they're going to breathe on me. They've breathed on you. You've held them. You've had them in your space. You know what that feels like. Now you can go and act within that. Go ahead. Hi. Is there a mic?
Hi, Sara. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm an actress who's worked with Emil recently, actually, and I wanted to just say to the producers in the room, the producers around the whole space, that I agree with you. I'm of the idea and mindset that we should actually have even therapists on set, but to work with an intimacy coordinator, I would add it should be on every single set. You've spoken now about strangers in your space. We touch each other, someone is your husband, partner, relative that you've never met. And I feel like the work is intimate. We should always have an intimacy coordinator in the same way we have a director. But to add that, sorry, I just lost my train of thought in the excitement. When I worked with Emma and Kate, it was one of my favorite times on set. Because, so I have a theatre background, and when we work in the theatre, we have many weeks to get to know each other, many weeks to get to sweat on each other if we're working physical movement, and just to get comfortable, which is why theatre kids can just take their clothes off anywhere and they feel very comfortable. But when you move on to a film set, you do not have that time. And working with you, Emma and Kate, gave that time. It was one of my favorite scenes on set because there was that foundation. And often you get onto a film set and you think, well, maybe I can't act because you're thinking about everything else, like the introduction. And it just made it so effortless. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Make Sense. And yes, I am there also in the training because I think there is so much more, much need in this space. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think that's a completely beautiful place to leave it because I mean I thank you for saying that, and I can't tell you how many actors say that. I mean it really it's something that we hear over and over and over again because it's the scary scenes. You know, like the actor reads through the script. They don't go, oh, this is a crazy stunt scene, I'm scared of this scene. They know the director's worked out how that stunt's going to go. They want to hear, how are we going to do the stunt, what's going to happen? It's the intimate scene that nobody talks about that all the actors are terrified of. I promise you, I've never met an actor that looks at a script and doesn't go, what I have to do, who's here, what I have to wear. You know what I mean? Like, how exposing am I going to be in this scene? That's the first thing that you look through the script and you're like, oh shit, there's a rape scene. Or you're like, oh shit, there's a sex scene. And we have to make those spaces safe because if we don't, number one, the productions are liable. You know, that's where the sexual harassment comes in. You bring in an intimacy coordinator, you negotiate consent, it's negotiated in public, there are witnesses to the consent, everybody knows what the boundaries are. So when those boundaries are broken, it's also very clear. You know, it's very clear and the production has done what they can to mitigate that. So, yeah, I mean, it's a no-brainer. As the industry, I'm just going to come round to the beginning of the talk, but as the industry becomes filled with more and more of this intimate content, that's the reality. That's what we're dealing with. There is going to be more and more intimate content. And as that happens, we have to work out how to make this a blessing, not a curse. You know, we don't have to add to the problem of sexual violence. We can help solve the problem of sexual violence by looking in these scenes and starting to understand, how do we storytell? Do we show ordinary people and not everybody looking like a model? You know, and if you start thinking of some of the British shows that are on TV, like that one about the young kids having sex for the first time, you know, kids should learn that sex is this perfect thing where everybody fits together and it all works brilliantly. That's not sex. Sex is messy. And it's people trying to fit into each other's bodies and find each other and dealing with breath in the morning. I mean, those are the stories that we can start telling. You know, when it's very interesting. I mean, this is a tiny little tangent, and then I'm going to finish. But I was at a film festival once, and one of the drivers was busy talking to me, and I was like, "What are your favorite movies?" And he said, "Oh no, his favorite movies are sex movies. He loves going to watch sex movies because that's how he learns about kissing." And it made me realize, actually, that is where we learn about kissing. You know, that's where we learn about sex. That's where we learn what sex looks like, by watching movies. And we can start showing real sex. You know, we can start showing complicated sex. We can start showing complicated kissing. When those beats are storytelling beats and not titillating beats. You know, when it's not about how much breast is showing or how much whatever is showing, but when it's about what is happening with the characters. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you.